Nobody can touch me because I would get blacklisted for that.
The persona in the front that we put forward into the universe.
You'd be standing and
Hi, I'm Gabi. Because I will miss that aspect.
something else. Yeah.
You're people, you're not creatures. I'm so sorry. I don't care if you hate me.
Just no. Tissue paper.
I dated a lot of Sagittarius men, and that just was not working.
Girls love her, boys love her.
And those connections and ideas change. 5% of podcasts don't make it past the first year. Hello and welcome back to the Z-List Celebrities. It's Gabi, and today I have a lovely guest. This is Shaun. Shaun, why don't you introduce yourself and explain what you do specifically in the wedding industry, since this month is all about wedding content.
Awesome. Hello, I'm Shaun Gray. I'm a wedding planner based in Houston, Texas. I've been a wedding planner here in Houston for over a decade, since 2011. And I help couples plan their weddings because they're simply too busy. And weddings are way too important to just do it in your spare time. I think more than ever, couples need professionals by their side to advocate for them, find them reputable vendors, and give them as close to a perfect celebration for their budget as possible. And so that's what me and my team try to do every day.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, so Shaun, we actually connected on social media, but ended up having some, familiarity and people in common with marrying in Tampa Bay and attending a lot of the same events. But I mean, let's just get right into it. Since I did find you on social media, how do you feel like social media has helped you in this industry? How's it evolving? How's it changing? Kind of give us a little layout of that.
Absolutely. So social media, I feel like today more than ever is a necessity for service providers, particularly in the wedding industry. With the emergence of short form video, it's so easy and couldn't be simpler for wedding pros to just turn on their camera, hit record, and share tips and advice and stories about what they go through and exactly how they're helping their couples achieve their wedding days in ways that other forms of social media never could. So when I got started in 2011, Instagram was just starting to take off. And I really never resonated with traditional Instagram because I felt there was more to the story than 1 or 5 static images. And I really feel like the art that's created by professional media teams doesn't tell the whole story, and yet so much of the industry relies just on professional photography and videography. They shortchange themselves by not taking advantage of the opportunity to just come on and talk through situations related to the wedding day. So that's how you and I got connected, was on short form video, and we've built up a pretty good friendship ever since, if I do say so myself.
Well, and so I love that perspective because I feel like a lot of vendors, and this is just on my end on the business side, not even as a bride side, working with so many vendors, I feel like I'm constantly hearing vendors complain of, I don't want to put my face on there. I don't want to hire a marketing team. All of these different challenges. How have you been able so seamlessly to kind of be comfortable in front of the camera and wanting to put yourself out there, where I see so many vendors not wanting to do that?
It's tricky. I don't understand why vendors have that outlook, to be quite honest with you, because so much of what we do when we sign clients is built around relationship building. And so if you don't want to share your face on social media, why do you show your face in a consultation? I don't look at those two things differently. I think sometimes we get caught up in the what ifs and like, what if I share a tip and people don't agree with me and then 500,000 people see it and then I look silly? Well, will you look silly if you actually believe what you're saying? Because if you actually believe what you're saying, then there's nothing to look silly about. And they don't take into account the fact that if you're yourself and you're sharing the information that you believe and that has worked for you, it is such a large net in an awareness standpoint using short form video. The right people are going to find you and the right people are going to hear your message. So I take very little pity on vendors who refuse to show up on short form video. I think that they're going to end up being left behind because at the end of the day, this is it. This is me. You know what I'm saying? And if you don't capitalize on that, you're not going to resonate with an audience.
Do you feel like it's almost becoming a little bit of an interview before the interview with clients? Like they're getting that chance to kind of it's like a resume, it's an interview. I feel like it encompasses all these different things where a lot of the times, even as a bride myself, I would just check their socials first to even see if I felt like we were a good fit. And if I didn't see a lot of posting or anything like that, it's not that it took away from their reputability or their credibility or their skill level. I just didn't feel the need to waste as much time getting to know them when I could get to know other people online.
Absolutely. It's a lot of what I hear when I speak to people in our industry on the vendor side is they're just so busy. They're too busy. And I look at it as like, well, if you're not using short form video and disciplined and posting regularly, fine. Let's go look at your other socials. Are you posting on Instagram regularly? Are you posting on Facebook regularly? And if the answer is no, then I really need them to come up and show other wedding professionals what they're doing to be so busy, but yet not put any stock in attracting new clients or sharing their own like tips and ideas around weddings. So I think it's a matter of they get so in the weeds of what they're doing and the clients they're servicing in life that they don't put enough stock into social media. And when you asked earlier how it has evolved, when I first started, you went on the Knot Wedding Wire, you advertised with them for a monthly or annual fee, and then the leads rolled in and you complained about the quality of leads, and that was just kind of how business operated. Now, you do not need a middleman to orchestrate the connection between you and your future client. It's as easy as just being on social media and letting your future client kind of do exactly what you said, Gabi. Get to know you, kick around the tires, see what you're posting, see what your thought process is, and then to decide to reach out to you. And I'll say this, when I got serious about short form video, it cut my consultations in half because all the questions are answered already. If you look around enough, you'll see like what kind of weddings I like to do, what my approach is to budgeting and timeline, so that by the time we sit down for a consultation, we can get in the cool things about your wedding and less about what my resume is like.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like for you personally, and I know it's different per vendor because some vendors, like if you're a florist, you're not traveling, you're not able to travel. I know planners, you do have that ability to travel. People can pay for your travel fees. But do you feel that TikTok or Instagram has been more beneficial to you? I know on my perspective on the marketing side, Instagram is way easier for me to niche to a location specifically, whereas TikTok, it's all over the board. We really haven't figured out how to control that aspect yet with these social medias. And if you've gained clients from this, are you seeing them more come from TikTok or Instagram?
I see them come from TikTok. So
Okay.
TikTok is like the awareness door where people get introduced to me, they want to have conversations with me, ask me some questions, and then Instagram is more like today's website. Kind of that's where I keep the professional photos and videos, galleries of my former work. I repurpose a little bit if it makes sense. I do treat both channels differently, but Instagram is kind of like my digital storefront, and TikTok is like the break room where you can find me every day.
I love that. So social media is definitely shaping how this industry is going, but kind of give me, let's like backtrack a little bit. We're going to go backwards. How did you get started in planning? Why do you love to plan? Like what kind of is your motivation in it and how you ended up there?
I was in nonprofit and political management when I lived in Reno, Nevada before I moved to Houston in 2011. And as the executive director of the party and kind of doing nonprofit events, when I got to Houston, those jobs really weren't transferable across state lines. So I thought, well, what did I like most about those jobs? And it was putting on the fundraising galas and the press events. And I thought, well, why not just be an event planner and open up my own firm and do weddings as well? I had never stepped foot into a wedding, even as a guest, when I first started. And at the time, marriage equality was not the law of the land nationwide. And so I looked at it as okay, if I'm going to front as a professional and logistically put these celebrations together for my couples, since I am not afforded the opportunity to have one should I meet somebody and fall in love, I was going to make damn sure that the couples that hired me wouldn't be able to take their day for granted either. And we were going to put on an intentional celebration that told their love story to their guests, and everything outside of that was just fluff and extra. And that's kind of how I started. I would go. I was the opening barista at Starbucks, so I worked the 4 to 1 shift to, like, still pay my bills while I built my business. And I would go into Michael's and Hobby Lobby's in the weddings aisle and would talk on the phone to a girl who was kind of helping me build my company, and we would act like we were talking about a future client's event just to pique the interest of the other shoppers in the aisle, to drum up conversations, to get them to be interested in our coordination or planning services.
I love that. That's like pre-social media days. That's very like in real life social media to me. I feel like just I'm just dropping this on your news feed. You don't have to interact if you don't want to, but if you want to interact, like, let's see it. No, I love that. So let's dive into, since then you've had all this experience, you've had years of experience with this. I want to know, what are some of your biggest like wedding pet peeves? What are things that really grind your gears or will maybe even make you not want to work with a couple?
What would make me not work with a couple? That's a tough one, because I've been really, really fortunate to have great couples. Like, I don't think there's one instance where I was like, man, I really, misread the tea leaves on the consultation, and now I'm stuck with them. That's side note. That's why I love what I do, is because even if somebody requires a little more attention or maybe a little more detail oriented or type A than I'm comfortable working with, all I got to do is get them down the aisle, and then I've got a fresh batch of new events after that one's over. So I would say my biggest pet peeve is people who get in this industry for the wrong reasons. And this is kind of fresh because I just got off of a wedding on Friday, but I was talking to some of my friend colleagues and other planners, and there's a lot of people, because it's commerce and it's business, who just get into it for the check. And they're horrific at customer experience and customer service. I mean, we saw that.
Oh, I
That's what
know.
got us. That's what kind of connected us.
Nightmares.
And I just don't think there's a place for them in the industry. And until everybody is super comfortable on social media, we're not going to be able to ice them out. But I believe that we need to ice them out and call them on the map for it, because they're taking too long to respond. Every excuse is always, oh, I'm busy, or, oh, I was helping another client. Well, if your book is getting too full, then it's time to look at expanding your team to be able to manage the caseload that you voluntarily entered into.
Well, gone, yeah.
And until that happens, I don't see us getting a lot better as an industry. And I refuse to just be like, well, that's the way it is. Some people are just awful. No, they don't need to be service providers in the weddings industry.
Well, and it's definitely getting into that, like, knowing that you want to be in a service industry and serve other people. You have to be somebody that likes to serve. I personally, not a huge serving girly. I'm not. I get frustrated easily. Like, I could not be a wedding planner. It's funny because I do a lot of event planning, but it's more like corporate side and like little local things. And people tell me all the time, they're like, you should plan weddings. And I was like, you know what? Brides would love me because I would get things done. Other vendors would hate me. I'm annoying. But I do think I've seen a lot of the whole, everybody just thinks they can now be a part of the industry. I know you've seen it. I'm pretty sure you've had a video on it where it's like every bride that gets married 5 days later, they're launching their planning business because they think they can now do it. And like those things like that, people that don't have that background or don't take the time to intern under somebody or get that education, they just want to fly into it. And where I see it the most right now is specifically with photographers. As a photographer myself, I feel like, and I have an unpopular opinion about this, and usually I catch some heat for this because my other photographer friends that are wedding photographers, they yell at me because they think I'm devaluing the industry a little bit, but I'll take on like 2 or 3 weddings a year. Not my niche, not my favorite. I don't love it. I take on very heavy budget brides that would not have a photographer if they couldn't, like, it's a niche little spot that I'm in. I really like it. It's less pressure. And their finances aren't there. And it's something that I like to do to kind of give back to the bride that's, she's blown her whole budget on the venue, or she wants to like really have her friends involved and they're flying in from out of town. I do try and focus on that. But a lot of my photographer friends are like, when you have that low of a budget, you devalue the cost of the photographer. And I just don't see it that way, because there's a lot of people out there, genuinely, weddings are getting so expensive, they can't afford it. So I've kind of found myself in that niche. But what I have seen is a lot of photographers have just decided now that they are $5,000 day photographers and they've never shot a wedding. And I'm like, where do you get off? Like, I'm just a little confused how we got here, because now they've figured out that that's where the photography money is. It's a lot more money than your $300, $500 session for an hour. Then, so we're seeing that kind of transition. And I think it almost makes it hard to weed out who's going to do great, because you're seeing all these styled shoots, and that's a styled shoot. It's not the pressure of the day. It's not, I think you've got an opinion on that one for me, but you're seeing all these styled shoots, which I love doing and I have no problem doing, but that doesn't show my ability to handle pressure on wedding day. So brides are booking these photographers that have no business shooting a wedding. They don't know how to, and then they're disappointed. I have a friend who her photographer does stunning work, absolutely beautiful work. But if you look at her page, I can pinpoint as a photographer, it's all styled shoots. She did her wedding and she came back around and she kind of asked, she was like, hey, do you have a picture of me and my mom at this position? She's like, oh no. Or like, she asked for pictures of like her full dress, and like the dress was cut off in some. And there was just like a lot of things missing from the day. And I genuinely think it's from the place of that photographer didn't realize, oh, you need to be here for this. You need to be here for that. You need this shot. You need that shot. A little crazy. So I feel like that's a transition we're also taking into photography side, where it's getting messy because everybody just thinks they're a wedding photographer now.
Style shoots are ruining the industry, in my opinion, and they have been for quite some time. There's a place for them. I think if we went back to the original intent of the style shoot, it was almost to be like to editorialize what a wedding would look like. And over time, what it's turned into is a collection of vendors get together. They like working together, and they say, well, let's go play make believe and pretend, and then let's make a couple bucks because we're going to charge photographers or whatever to come in and shoot it, which is so weird to me, because if you did a style shoot and then after the style shoot was over, you saw a rotation of like 6 or 7 photographers shooting the same thing. One, I feel like that doesn't protect the integrity of the editorial work that you put into the style shoot. And two, it becomes oversaturated for a setup that, shouldn't have really had the attention and time put into it. But what happens is once that gets out there and the media is out into the ether, couples and people planning their weddings who might not be as dialed in as some others are look at that as like a real attainable thing for their own wedding day, and it's not. It's pretend, it's make-believe, it's what we do on our free time. And when we talked earlier about vendors being so busy, and you look at their social media work and it's all style shoots, and it's like, well, if you'd quit playing dress up in the closet and figure out how to serve real legitimate clients, you probably would be less busy and more money in your pocket.
Well, and I totally get the fact too, for photographers specifically, that if you want to break into an industry, you might need some work under your belt to attract a bride. But my recommendation is go second shoot for somebody. Go get that experience under somebody at a real wedding instead of setting up all these styled shoots. And I'm just as guilty. I've done a couple styled shoots, but I always left feeling more drained than fulfilled. I felt like, okay, I'm going to be posting this for the next month to get my wedding content out there. But then when that bride asks, like, oh, I want this, I want that, I have to disclose that was a styled shoot. Like, it's going to be different on your day. It's going to be a whole different experience. So I feel like that's where it's getting a little dicey with photographers. And that actually, and we are going to talk about that because I have not shared online my photographer story. You found me through my hair experience, but I got a photographer story for you, but we'll close off with that one. But that kind of actually leads into how I kind of feel like I ended up in a weird situation with a photographer as well. But before we touch that, I would love to know, have you ever declined anybody that you thought might be a bridezilla or a groomzilla even, and you just like off the get-go, you're like, this is not going to be a good fit? Do you find yourself ever having to decline couples, or do you feel like that's not what you're attracting, so you don't see that very often?
I've not had to decline a couple. And I've said that some may require a little more hand holding or be a little more type A than I'm comfortable with. And while I'm like, well, I just got to be better on the next one to kind of weed that out, it's not enough to make me regret working together because there's a piece of me, Gabby, that feels like I am one of the best suited individuals to work with a couple to plan their wedding. So if a couple comes to me and we talk and they seem legitimate and fine and they view me in the same way, regardless of what it turns into, again, I won't take that experience for granted and I'll still deliver all I can to ensure their wedding day is exceptional. What I feel happens with the creation of the Zillas, and I'm sure you're the same way. I don't like that term. I feel like, again, the industry created that term because they got tired of getting questions. And I believe a Zilla is created when they become ignored for too long and you're not quick to respond and you make them lay their head at night on their pillow with too many questions about their day still left unanswered. I think quick and efficient communication is the easiest way to keep a client in positive spirits throughout the wedding planning journey.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And I agree, like bridezillas, groomzillas, I do think they're created. I'm a very type A girl. I obviously am in the industry, so I intentionally booked a wedding planner that was a 2 month. She just picked up right now. But that being said, Gabby's incredible and she has been helping me all the way through. I think that's the hard part too with that 2 month planning and 1 month planning. And I know everybody kind of has an opinion on that as well. I much rather, if a bride comes to me and says I can't afford a planner, I much rather them at least have a 1 month or a day of. I hate to see a bride walk away and be like, I'm just not going to do a planner. I'm like, that's a mistake. Please don't do that. I get very, very passionate about that. So like, even if it's a budget thing, if you can at least do a month of, I highly recommend it. I personally did a 2 month, but she's just so on top of it that she's been there through all of it. But as a type A person, I feel like sometimes it's really easy to get misconstrued as a bridezilla because you know what you want. And you, especially for me, I know the terminology. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Like there's no words I don't know within the industry. So it's really easy for me to almost feel like I'm micromanaging people, which isn't the goal. It's just, I know what I want. And I think sometimes vendors are a little intimidated by that. They think that they get to kind of not share a ton and just show up and present this beautiful thing. And I'm like, no, I know exactly how that works. And I'm going to want it done this way. And I think people really hate that. But when you're spending this kind of money, if I'm not doing it, the planner needs to be doing it. That's what the planner job is. I feel like, to know that lingo and to know their way around the contracts. I wish I had known my way better around the photography contract when I signed it. Like that was one that I didn't get to show Gabby beforehand, and that turned out to be a mistake. So I think having that planner there to kind of take the bridezilla pressure off probably creates a lot less bridezillas because we're less stressed out, feeling like we have to go to bat for ourselves. So
If
that's a big
you, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just,
no, you're
if
good.
you're like, you defined it as you're type A, so you bring in a coordinator 2 month, 1 month out. If that coordinator on the day that that 2 month mark hits is not raring to go, ready to go, here's my procedure, here's what the rest of our experience together is going to look like, and they're just like, oh, I forgot to schedule our up to speed consultation or whatever. That's not going to fly with someone like you. And it shouldn't fly with any client because you're booking a service that starts on a certain day. So it's time to start the service on the certain day. And
Exactly.
you're right. They take it for granted. They take it that like not many clients have the same outlook as you do, so they can be a little more lax. And oh, it's just a wedding. We've done hundreds of them at this point. Well, not to the client. Not to the
It's
client. It's
probably
one of
their
the
one and
most
only.
important days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be their one and only. So take it seriously. And I think that's where you're kind of getting with the whole weeding out the bad vendors. I think that a lot of people are in it right now for the money because weddings are so expensive that people are taking advantage of that opportunity, which is a little icky, but I do think it will fade out. I definitely, especially think it's going to fade out. And this leads me into a question I have for you is it has been all over my TikTok in the wedding world, but also just in general. So I'm curious to see if you have an opinion on it. And I'm speaking of the proposal gap. I don't know if you've heard about that yet, but basically everybody's saying we're coming off of 2020. People didn't date through 2020, 2021. Are we learning how to date? And now we're seeing for 2024. I've talked to a lot of my vendor friends. They're like already booking out for 2025 and 2026, but they really didn't book a lot for 2024. So we're entering that proposal gap phase. And then there's a ton of other versions of this gap where basically everybody feels like they're stunted 2 or 3 years. Like friends that are turning 30 are now like, no, I still feel like I'm 25. And like this weird little strain that we have because of COVID. Do you see that on your side of business? And how are you kind of coping with it or overcoming that? Do you feel like that'll lead to a lot of these kind of lesser than vendors that have just gotten in on the hype to kind of dwindle out because it's slow?
I wish I could say yes, and I'm sure that it probably will to some degree. But I felt it more in our company in 2023. So I feel
Okay.
like 2023 bookings were uncharacteristically low.
Okay.
However, 2024 feels like something resembling normal cadence. So, like, booked solid through the spring because we kind of have the first wedding season is in the spring and the second one is in the fall. Houston is dead July and August, like nobody gets married.
Us too. Well, we're even kind of dead fallish, early fallish because of hurricane season. We have those brides that come down here that are not local. And every time I see somebody book a September, October wedding, I'm like, ooh, you're making a mistake, but let them live. Let them live.
But I do think that the ones who got in it thinking that it was going to be like, a treasure chest will
Mhm.
find out that it takes a little more. And I hope they realize that they need to stop putting all of their stock in traditional advertising and realize that they are their own media conglomerate and start showing up as themselves on social media to try to. Gabby, it's funny. If there's less customers in the pool, you have to stay top of mind more frequently. And the only way to do that is to continue to produce content of yourself so that you stay top of mind every time your prospect, scrolls on their feeds.
Being present. Yeah, being present. I feel like a lot of my vendor friends struggle with that because they're so good at their craft, but they're not social media people. And I think that that's where we're seeing a rise in the need for social media marketers to help you kind of figure that out. But it's an interesting little wave of things. I know personally, Marry Me Tampa Bay, we're now offering behind the scenes content for wedding days, which is obviously becoming very popular. But what I really like the angle that we've also taken with that I think is super cool is we're now offering those services to vendors as well. So if there is going to be a styled shoot or if they are doing something, hey, the bride didn't hire us, but do you want to hire us to come in and get that content of you so you can use it for your social media? And we're seeing a lot of people interested in it, which is great because that means they do want to put the effort towards that. So seeing that kind of shift is cool too.
I would do it in a heartbeat because let me tell you, Friday I had it all mapped out, but yet I didn't take into account like setup, and it's really hard for me to get into a content creation mindset when I'm serving a client on a wedding day because
Yep.
I'm managing 6 or 7 different timelines and load-ins and did they get everything right to think, oh, let me capture this. It's really hard to do. So the fact that y'all have started a service for wedding pros. I hope it takes off because it needs to, and I can't wait till something like that shows up here in Houston.
Well, and that's the thing. You're doing your job. Your job isn't to do your job on wedding day and create content for yourself. Like that just doesn't even make sense. At that point, either you need a team member that can do that, and that's their role at weddings, or you do need outside help. So I'm kind of excited to see that shift because obviously I feel like we're seeing content creators everywhere for wedding days, but I'm not seeing anybody do it for the vendor yet. And I feel like that's the target niche that actually wants and needs it. You'll have the one off bride that's social media savvy, like myself, that wants that kind of content. But most brides don't know to even ask for it or care. Whereas the vendors, that's something that I feel like they're really going to need. So I'm kind of excited to see that shift, but we'll see how it plays out over the next year or so. I'm intrigued nonetheless. I've done a couple of weddings now as a behind the scenes creator, and it's fun. It's like fun to see the whole setup and experience and get to hang out with the vendors. I love hanging out with the vendors, not being one technically myself, but like getting to be a part of that is super fun. But next question I had for you. I want to know, and this one you might have to like think about it for a second. So if you need a moment, just let me know. But biggest wedding disaster. What is the biggest disaster you feel like you've faced?
I was a month up coordinator. This was the first video I made where like people actually watched it. I was a month of coordinator.
Okay.
The couple had, booked all of their vendors before our services started. And when we do month of coordination, we confirm vendors 30 days, 7 days, and 2 days before the wedding. So I was confirming the vendors with the caterer. We were confirming meal counts. Everything looked good. Wedding day comes around and we're setting up the space. And I start looking at the clock and I'm like, that's really weird that the caterer hasn't shown up yet. And so I looked at the timeline and I was like, yeah, they should have been here. Let me give them a call. Maybe they have, maybe their prep is different and so they don't need as much time on site. Call them, no answer.
Oh no.
Okay. Called another number, no answer. Looked on their social media, no activity today. And I thought, that's really strange. So now we're getting really close to they were also providing the refreshments for cocktail hour. And so I knew that even if they showed up now, the chances of them being ready to go for cocktail hour was slim to none. So I sent one of my event day managers out to go get cocktail hour refreshments. I had a vendor reach out to me that knew this caterer, had working knowledge with this caterer before. So I said, will you reach out? They reached out, no answer. And I thought, okay, so now we got to do something different. So Sarah comes back with the cocktail stuff. I'm sitting at the entrance to the ceremony with the bride. I have not told her anything's wrong. She's with her dad. I send her down the aisle. I'm panicking at this point. I run to the venue office. What is the closest restaurant to this venue? And they said there's a Olive Garden about 2 miles down the road. So I called the Olive Garden, spoke with the kitchen manager, begged him to get started on an Italian buffet for 85 people without payment. He said, Shaun. I said, sir, I swear to you, I am at this wedding venue. The ceremony is currently taking place. Mom's in the front row. I cannot get a credit card to you right now until after the ceremony's finished. You need to start this now so that it won't be too long and guests really suspect something's up. I will run and get that credit card for mom as soon as the ceremony's over. By the grace of God, the kitchen manager agreed to that. And then as soon as the ceremony was finished, I ran up to the front row, tapped mom, said I needed her Amex, let her know what was happening. She gave it to me. I called Olive Garden, got the payment on file. My event day manager went and picked it up, and we ended up working outside of our contract and serving that buffet to 85 guests. And it resulted in maybe a 20-minute delay on dinner. But that is the largest disaster I've ever.
Did you ever hear from the caterer?
No, the client, not on the wedding day, not after. The client was able to work it out and get their money back from the caterer. But that was the biggest disaster I've ever dealt with. Another one, photographer story. I had a photographer hire a second shooter because he was allegedly mugged the night before the wedding. And at that moment, I'm like, this was my third wedding. At that moment, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, but also like tomorrow's a wedding day, so I'm gonna need you to figure it out. He said, don't worry, I have a second shooter. It's coming to shoot in my place. Contractually, I'm like, okay, he did what he needed to do, so I hope you feel better. Towards the end of the wedding, the second shooter starts asking for payment. And I'm like, can I get the client's contact information for payment? And I said, no, the client's already paid. And he said, well, the guy that hired me, I said, if you showed up to a job without getting payment, you're going to need to take that up with the person that hired you. But as far as we're all concerned, the client's paid for photography. So he said, fine. I could never reach again the original hired photographer. Never again. Just went AWOL. Then the second shooter, and of course through now we're phone calling and texting. This is weeks after the wedding. And I said, I will settle with you to get these images back. I just need a little bit of grace considering what has happened, but I will get you taken care of. According to the original photographer's agreement, they had 3 months to deliver media to the couple. So when it got to about 2 months, 2 weeks, I was finally like, I'm gonna have to fess up because now second shooter went AWOL on me. This was a couple who was in the act. They were both active duty military. They were coming back home. They were stationed in Hawaii. They were coming back home to get married in his childhood church. And
Okay.
all I kept thinking was my third wedding out the gate, and I botched it this bad for a couple of American heroes. So I had done a community festival and made friends with the security team who provided security for the festival. And I knew that they had a private investigation arm in their business. So that security firm ended up being private investigators for me and went and muscled those photos and videos from that shooter, and I was able to deliver it back to my client. It was late. I did have to fess up to the client and let him know that it would be delayed, why it was delayed, what I was doing to correct the situation. But I would say 2 months after that, we were finally able to locate the hard drive with all the media on it, and I was able to deliver it to the client.
See, and that's technically, I feel like, out of a planner's like contract and wheelhouse. So it sounds like you go above and beyond
But
because,
see, Gabby, I disagree. See, here's why I disagree. I made that recommendation for that photographer.
okay,
And
that makes
so
sense.
I feel like I have to see it through to its completion. I couldn't be like, oh, that stinks. I'm so sorry to hear that. Because it was like, mofo, it was your recommendation.
Definitely different. I feel like when you've recommended the vendor, I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of brides nowadays, like I know for Gabi, it's so funny because my planner's name is Gabi. So I know I confuse the crap out of everybody when I'm talking about it. It sounds like I'm talking about myself. But for Gabi, I went and found all my planners. She didn't help me find anybody. So for me, obviously I work in the industry, but like if something went wrong with the vendor in my book, like in my space, in my lane, I'm like, that's my fault. That's not Gabi's fault, especially if she's doing everything she can to keep everybody in line. Not her problem. But I guess in this scenario, you're right. Like if you recommended them, that's definitely something that you would want to work out for them. But I mean, even the caterer, you said you hadn't worked with them before, and I'm like, where did you go? What are you doing? Like, people are wild. You're unlocking new wedding fears that I did not need.
Well, with the caterer, the couple told me that they got it for like $22 a plate all in. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, fine, but if you Houston geography, that caterer was based probably 45 miles away from the wedding venue.
Okay.
You're spending $22 just to get to the wedding venue. So already I was like, this is too good to be true. Like this, they get so caught up in finding good deals and finding things for the best price. And I know it kind of went against what we were talking about photography, but like there are some instances where if it sounds too good to be true, it
It
likely
is.
is.
Yeah. And I think that that's, like I said, I only do like 3 weddings a year, and they're like low budget, like some are shotgun wedding, like it's quick. It's something moving really fast, a lot of courthouse. Um, and so I feel like that in that sense it's different, but I totally agree with you on the aspect of sometimes the lower budget person, you're getting what you're paying for, so don't expect a lot. Um, I definitely feel like from my perspective, since it's more so like I don't love to do weddings, for me, it's more so this is my way to like give back to like a lot of the clients that I've done for weddings are people that I've shot other things before. So they're like, we want you, we're used to you. And I'm like, that's great. I'll do it. But I don't get excited about weddings. I think they're long days. It's brutal. I have a lot of back stuff and back injuries. So it's a long day for me. And it's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of editing and just not my thing.
Is that being reinforced now that you're planning your own, or are you liking them more, or still no?
I love weddings. Like I love working with Marry Me Tampa Bay. I love talking about weddings. I love seeing weddings, things like that. I think it's more so the working it side. I think it's different. Like I love the post. I love to see it all come together. I don't need to be on that planner side. I don't need to be on the come up. I want to see it all perfectly together. I stare at over 20 weddings a day for Marry Me Tampa Bay, and I love seeing everyone, and I can sit there and I can break it down, I can critique it, but I don't need to know the 10 months you took to plan it. I really don't. And I really don't. I
Fair.
think that's where like I'm like I love it, but I definitely like the side that I'm on, which is a lot of the post production. So that's kind of where I thrive in. But I will say that photography one, that's wild. That being said, did you hear about it's been TikTok viral, so you might have seen it, but that poor photographer, she was from out of state, flew in for their wedding and was flying back, and her camera bag got stolen with all of the memory cards, the raw photos, and those photos are gone. They've gone on the news trying to beg for somebody to just return the memory cards, and like they've lost every single wedding photo they have.
My heart broke for that couple. Um, a lot of photographers I talk to will be like, "Yeah, that's why you keep the media on your person, like the SD cards and the memory cards, like in a bag on your body." For that reason, I can't. That's a fluke, but
Yeah.
man, that's such a big fluke to have happen because
It,
there's aside from a good Samaritan or somebody's conscience like coming back and knocking on their door, they're not going to get that footage back.
no, and I think what's so upsetting to me, I think that it like puts it out there for me to it's something else to worry about. I don't want that pressure. That's why I also don't like doing weddings because I would probably be the one to make that mistake. Like I never thought about keeping my memory cards on my person before. But that being said, most of the work I do is local. I'm not flying, so I leave the space and I go straight home, whether it's like just a normal shoot or a wedding. Like I'm coming right home, so I don't think about that, and that's something I
Yeah.
never would have thought of. So it really like kind of changed my headspace on that I was like there's a new fear unlocked as a photographer too that I just never want to have. I've had files go corrupt before, but even then I've been able to like salvage them. So it's like
Mm.
I've had my moments where I'm like, oh, this is like I've had a memory card break on me and I thought it was gonzo for good, and I was able to still pull everything off and use AI to fix the pictures. So things happen. Things happen. But like to lose them for good and not be able to do anything about it, that's where I was like,
Is
couldn't.
there no product? Look, now we're just going to do some industry talk because I'm not intimately involved with like the mechanics of photography and
Yeah.
videography. But like, is there a product that exists that you can like plug in a memory card and then all of the files like get stored into a cloud? And so even if you lost the physical card, you can still access the footage from the cloud?
Yeah, but you have to get back to your computer to do that. So like if it's
Uh,
something that happens between then and you getting to your computer, you're kind of shit out of luck. I will say my camera does this, and I do it right when I leave if I have the time. But weddings, it's harder because I'm taking over 10,000 photos. So a normal session, I'll do it where it's like 1,000 to 3,000 photos. I have an app that uploads straight to my phone from the camera. It's obviously not my computer for editing, but it's my phone, and I do some editing on my phone, especially when I'm flying and stuff. So I usually start that process if I'm leaving an engagement shoot. I start uploading immediately when I get in the car when I'm driving home because I'm not on my phone anyways. So it's like, oh, that's good. It'll sit in the passenger seat. It'll download photos. By the time I get home, it'll be done. So I do that, but I can't do that for a wedding gallery. I had a wedding this summer, and her wedding, she split it up. She did her ceremony early in the morning because it was July, and then she did her reception late at night. So there was a big gap where everybody went home and napped and chilled. So I did go home, so I upload her ceremony photos while I was gone. And then I came back and shot the reception. But by the time I was done with the reception, I'm like 7,000 photos deep. I'm not going to be able to upload those to my phone unless I have hours to do it, which I don't. And at that point, I'm just going to plug it into my computer. So it's getting back to the computer.
You're talking about like the come up from a planner's perspective. I cannot imagine having like all of the media from that day and then like, getting it stolen or having it fly out of the car if you're in an accident. Like that that would drive me crazy. Sometimes I'll have the rings like from the rehearsal to wedding day, and even that I'm like, "Oh gosh, to put it keep it safe. Don't draw attention to where I put it." Like I'm just so scared something's gonna happen.
I have those intrusive thoughts, like really dark intrusive thoughts. And I had a proposal I shot on the beach 2 weeks ago, and it was booked through a picnic company. So I didn't know the couple personally, shot the proposal. I got the girl's phone number so I could get her email. And I'm driving home and I have to drive a bridge to get home. And I'm sitting on this bridge and I'm like, what if I just like went into the ocean and like she never heard from me again? I genuinely, that was my only thought. I was like, I'm the only one with her proposal pictures and I could just drive off this bridge right now. I was like, and it's so intrusive, so bad. But like, I think about that stuff all the time. Like, I get home and I immediately like upload the photos, freak out. So,
But, but then you think of like the responsibility that certain vendors have for this day, and it blows my mind how many wedding vendors are not insured.
that's true. That's another thing. And
Like
and
that.
that goes into like, so for me personally, since I'm only doing like 2 or 3 weddings a year, I'll get day of, but I'm not going to pay for the year because why would I? Whereas
Right.
like a lot of people, Gabby has had to remind a lot of my vendors, hey, don't forget to send me your insurance. And I'm like, how are you guys making it out there? But these are like reputable companies, so I'm wondering if like they are doing just like what I do, like day of, or if they have it for the year and they just forget. I don't know a lot of that's a foreign language to me, but the fact that you guys are obviously responsible to collect all of that wedding insurance for the venue, I'm blown away half the time when people are like, oh, I need that, and I'm like, what? Yes, of course you need that.
When you do like the amount that you do, it probably makes more sense to do it event by event for
Mhm.
coverage. But I just had a friend of mine who's a content creator in California reach out to me for who my provider is because it's like she's getting an insurance policy every time she's got to get a every time she has a wedding, and that starts to add up. And
Yep.
I'm floored at how many are like, well, I mean, I don't need insurance. I'm the videographer. What's the beauty vendor need insurance for? And I'm like, one, you're doing work in a place that's not your own, so you want to make sure you're protecting yourself from damage to the space that you're working in. Two, those intrusive thoughts, I mean, the most expensive insurance is the one you don't have.
Well, that story alone with the girl getting her camera stolen made me want to go and get my camera insured because I never really thought about that either. And now I'm like, I think I should probably do that because it's expensive equipment. As much as I felt terrible for the couple, the sympathy started to creep in for the photographer as well for me. Not only is she disappointing that couple, and I know how heart wrenching that is for her, but the equipment she lost, whew, I wouldn't be surprised if it was upwards of 20 grand of equipment. Like
And
wedding
unfortunately,
photography equipment's not cheap.
and that's going to stunt her probably for a couple of weeks or months after that incident because she's going to
Yeah.
have to recoup all that equipment. That's heartbreaking.
I'm hoping, I don't know if she had like full on a ton of insurance, but I'm hoping she had some. I felt like I read somewhere because I went and read an article after, but I think she has some, which thank goodness. But yeah, that really throws you back. You better hope at that point either like that if you have a couple right after that, either you can borrow somebody's equipment and they're willing to let you, or that you can throw that on a credit card and hope you can pay it off soon because it's just not cheap. So I
Hmm.
had a lot of sympathy for that situation, but the photography game is very interesting. And obviously, we're entering into videographer era. Everybody's got a videographer. My videographer is actually from Houston. They're coming up. Yeah, Justin Porter Media. If you have not worked with him, you should. He's fantastic. I
How'd y'all connect?
TikTok.
Love it.
We've been following each other on TikTok for a really long time. He really blew up. He's does fantastic work. He's a prime example for vendors of being online and showing that presence. He's done so well with it that he actually now is doing speaking engagements. He's doing classes. So he's really expanded, but he actually got into it because he films wedding videos, but instead of like wedding videos, he films wedding documentaries. And they're kind of like Netflix style. They're 20 minutes long instead of your traditional 6.
He's the
um,
one that has the rig, right?
yes, yeah, he
Yes,
is. He's fantastic. He's
he
so
is.
fun. And it's so my style. My dad gave me, my dad, he's just older guy. He just doesn't, a lot of these things, he doesn't understand why we're doing it or what it is. And I'll never forget him being like, are you like, this isn't a reality show, Gabby. Why do you have like a whole video team coming? Like, this isn't a reality TV show. And I'm like, but it kind of is, Dad. Kind of is. So he's awesome. He comes with like 16 mics. So 16 people will be mic'd all day long for like audio and stuff like that. So it's going to be cool. I'm really excited to see what he does. With that, obviously, it creates a longer wait time to get it back. I think his like sheet or his deadline is like 8 months, which I know video traditionally is more like the 5 to 6 month window. So definitely having to wait a little extra long, but for that kind of product, that's like one of those things you're willing to splurge, you're willing to wait, because that is like a memory you won't get back. I think that video is really on the come up in the sense that we're starting to realize the value of being able to hear your loved ones talk at like, what could be your last big event with them. So I think that transition is going to be really cool to see as we enter into 2024.
I love that you found him on TikTok and are bringing him to your market, because for really most of the year I have been saying, I even talked to Anna about this a little bit from Marry Me Tampa Bay, but like the world is getting smaller, and if you're sitting there thinking about the vendors that you want on your wedding day, and maybe you've scoured locally and you're not finding them, if you really vibe with somebody who lives far away and the only thing holding you back is a travel fee, more and more couples are being like, that's my person, I vibe with them, I like their work, let me pay the travel fee to get that vendor to service my wedding.
Exactly. But I will say, on the contradictory side, I feel like this leads us great into my photographer story, because I almost had the opposite issue with that. So basically, let me give you the details of that story, and then I would love your opinion on maybe where I went wrong, what I could have done differently, or where you think that the vendor could have been more transparent. So I actually found a girl that I absolutely was obsessed with her work. She was based out of San Diego, on Instagram, and I fell in love with her stuff. I reached out to her. It was actually somebody we had been following each other on our personal pages and businesses for years. So I felt very comfortable with it. We had talked on multiple occasions. And so when it came time to book, I would say about November, I reached out to her and was like, hey, I really want to book you for my wedding. Can you give me your costs? Can you give me your travel fees? Everything like that. She broke it down for me. We had one phone call, which I think that's the other thing that I really, for any of my other vendors that were out of state, what I didn't love that she did is it was just a really quick, like maybe 10-15 minute phone call, and then a contract was sent over. Whereas Justin sat down, we had a 30-minute FaceTime video with him. We just had some more personal connection on that. And maybe she didn't feel that that was important because we had been connected on social media for so long. But sorry, one second. My lovely dog, I have a Great Dane. She's a beautiful girly, but she likes water bottles and to take the lids off, and she was about to make a lot of noise. You can have this later. Love you. Um, but anyways, with that photography sense, I just felt like I was not getting the royal treatment that I thought I would get with her after knowing her for so long. But I went ahead and booked. I really liked her work. She told me in that 10 to 15 minute conversation that I for sure would not need a second shooter. I was like, okay, if you feel very confident that I don't need one, I didn't have the budget. I had wasted a lot of my budget on videography. So I was like, that's fine. I trust you. You seem like you know what you're doing and you're a professional in that sense. So that's okay. We won't do a second shooter. I signed the contract. We're good to go. She kind of ghosts me. I just don't hear much else from her. I would reach out every now and then. Her response time would be very, very lagged. And I would get responses that were like, please don't reach out to me without in the frames of office hours. And I kind of responded back because it was weird because I had reached out during office hours and she responded to me at like 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. on a Thursday. Like just like weird things were happening and I didn't love it. And then I ended up having a girl reach out on Instagram who has shot me personally, whereas this girl hasn't, and was like, I know you've already booked a wedding photographer, but I'm obsessed with what you're doing with the wedding. I would love to come second shoot to get more wedding experience under my belt. Would your photographer be open to it? I won't charge you. I won't charge her. I just want to like be a part of your day and get that experience. I was like, that shouldn't be a problem, but like, let me make sure and let me check. So I reached out to this girl and she kind of gave me a hard time. And I think my trigger point was in the email. She was like, I don't really work well with vendors I don't know. And I was like, ma'am, you're coming to my wedding in Florida. You live in California. You're not going to know a single vendor. So if you're saying that about a second shooter, I get it's a little bit more close and personal. But I think another red flag for me was like my mom made a jokey comment of like, does she really think like she's that center of attention star of the show when we've got this big videographer coming? Like she's gonna have to share. Like she's already showing she can't play nice with others. So I was like, okay, a little bit of a red flag. There was something else that happened too, and I'm trying to like rack my brain. This was so long ago now, but she just was very like unresponsive, kind of hard to work with. Um, and I hadn't bought her flight yet or anything. That was like next on my list was to buy her flight, but I wanted to clarify everything. And when she kind of gave me a hard time about the second shooter, I went back to look at my contract. And this was 1,000% my mistake. And this is why I'm walking proof of getting a planner is so important. I was getting so many contracts at that point. I think I just didn't read this one as well as I wanted to. But it did say in there that she had full control over second shooters, which was fine. She had agreed to this girl. We were going to let it go. But what really sent me into a little bit of a like fizzle fit was we had talked on the phone in that 10 minutes, and I made it abundantly clear that I worked for Marry Me Tampa Bay and that my wedding would be featured and that she needed to be okay with, having those rights to my photos. And I saw in the contract that it all of a sudden had a clause in there that said I had no rights to my photos, I had no ownership rights, and that I wasn't allowed to publish my wedding. So I reached out to her and I was like, hey, we talked about this. I don't know how I missed this in the contract the first time, but I really need this to be able to be published. I'm working with a lot of vendors who gave me fantastic deals because this is being published. So it's like a non-negotiable. And she reached out and she's like, yeah, I told you it'd be fine. And I was like, well, with everything that's been going on, I'm not really comfortable. Would you mind writing an addendum to the contract? Refused, downright refused, threatened a lawyer on me, and like went berserk. So I was like, I talked to my mom about it and was like, I'm just not feeling comfortable anymore. And at this point, we were 7 months out. So she hadn't done a single lick of work. She hadn't like gotten any, I was paying for her flight and buying it, and I was putting her up in a hotel. So no travel was made. She had 7 months to find new clients. So I wasn't keeping her from work because I know one of the biggest reasons like photographers keep a deposit, even if you cancel, is because you've impeded us from other jobs. But she had 7 months, so I very politely was like, I feel like our energies aren't aligning. I'm very worried about how the day is going to go since I feel there's already resentment coming towards you or from you. I think it's best if we part ways. You have plenty of time to find new clients, new things like that. So I think it's best if we terminate this contract. I would really appreciate if you gave the deposit back, seeing as that you've only had a 10-minute phone call with me and you've done no other work thus far. And she pulled the lawyer card again, a couple of other things. It got kind of weird and nasty, and this is where maybe my bridezilla came out. But I told my mom, I was like, do a chargeback on the credit card. We can talk about it with the credit card company, but she hasn't done anything, and she won't talk to me anymore. She's threatening these imaginary lawyers, and we have to pay another photographer now. So do a chargeback, see what happens. It ended up that it took funds from both of us. And so we mediated. My dad stepped in because he's the level-headed one out of us women over here. But he mediated, and they kind of agreed that they'd go halfsies on the deposit. So I'm still not thrilled about that. She still made out with about $1,000 for doing nothing. But digging deep into that, after that, we kind of really looked into it. All of the weddings she had on her page, after some more thorough searching, all styled shoots. She had never really traveled very anywhere except for Mexico, which it was always places that were only an hour flight from her. And I just felt like she kind of was just using this as an opportunity to get over on the East Coast, but didn't really want to put in that work. So it was frustrating. But yeah, I did lose some money in that. So that was my mistake for not reading the contract. My lessons here, not reading the contract, and I think I just assumed I didn't have to do as much research on her because I was already following her, but that was a mistake. So that's how I had to hire a new photographer who is fantastic. I absolutely love Ashley. Well worth it. We've now shot with her once before. She's great energy. She gave us a really good deal because of the situation, was very accommodating. But my mom was very adamant after that to not book vendors from outside of the state. So like it put a bad taste in her mouth. So that was like kind of a transition that we had. Whereas like you and I are pro team, like make the world smaller, bring in vendors from other places. I think for my parents and their experience specifically, they're like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like, done. Bad experience. So what do you think about all that? What are your takeaways? Because I feel like I learned a lot, but I also feel like I could have avoided a lot of that.
It sounds like from the jump, you kind of felt some type of way before you even signed the contract versus, oh, I don't know if it's that 10-minute phone call or something, just the vibe was off from the jump. But it was almost like, well, but we're connected on social media and have been for so long, I'm sure it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
There, you hit it on the head when, because I'm like, why would she care about a second shooter? If anything, if I was her, I would be like, oh my gosh, a local second shooter, thank heavens, because that would take some of the burden and the requirement of familiarity of the space away, because
Mhm.
you would imagine the second shooter would have some, especially as um, gassed as she was to get to work on your wedding day. Like, hey, go
Yeah.
over and make sure you're familiar with the venue before the day. She, of course, would have done that. It sounds to me like, and I mean, this is an Instagram thing, but it's easier to do that on the gram than it is
Yeah.
if you were showing yourself. Like
Well, I
Justin,
agree.
he's in it to win it. I mean, that man is always filming something. He's always showing the equipment and what his process is. And you really need that today, because that's just an additional layer that shows, okay, they do know what to do on the actual day. I wouldn't beat yourself up, Gabby, because a lot of couples fire vendors or find something out that makes them uncomfortable through the process. Is it right? No, of course not.
Yeah.
We should be ethical service providers from the jump, and that should be a benchmark. But because we're unregulated, we're a long way away from that.
Well, and I feel like that I do think that if she hadn't been a photographer, like my fiance brought up a really good point in all of it when it was all going down. Between videographer and photographer and maybe even planner, but not really because you guys are running around doing other things, we spend the majority of our day with those two vendors. So like if she had been a florist or something else, maybe I would have just let it go because like I wasn't going to see her anyways, but we were going to have to spend all day with her. And my fiance brought it up in a way that he was like, are we going to be comfortable? Are we going to be loose with her? Like, we already have this stigma with her. Like, how are we going to feel? And so I feel like that was the deciding factor where I was like willing to even lose money on it because I was like, I can't stand with somebody for like 8 hours and be okay with this, knowing what I know. And even the commentary of like, this second shooter came in and said, I want to do this for free. And the lingo in her emails to me were very, oh, okay, well, then I guess I'll waive the second shooter fee. And I'm like, I'm not asking you to waive anything. This is somebody I brought to the table. You didn't bring her, I brought her. So, like, I don't owe you any more money. I felt very swindled in that sense. And I feel like the only reason she didn't want to give me the deposit back was because she for sure already spent the deposit. That's really what was happening. So I just,
As
mm,
soon as she threatened a lawyer or mentioned a lawyer through that first interaction y'all had when something was off on the contract, immediately throws the vibe off. Like that was never gonna be a warm, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, you're part of my day, once that was thrown out there.
no,
Uh,
nobody wants to be threatened with a lawyer. That's like the least attractive thing in the world.
and yeah, and I mean, don't mention it unless you're about to do it, or else it's just you're not doing anybody any favors by throwing those words around.
Well, and it was, I think what also was, minus the fact saying that she didn't like to work with vendors that she didn't know well, I think that another thing that really like rubbed me the wrong way is who doesn't want their work featured? I didn't understand that. I was like, I'm asking for an addendum to something that benefits you. Like none of that would ever harm or hurt you. You're being credited. You take one look at our website and you know like what kind of accreditation we do. We credit everybody, member or not. It's a requirement. We don't mess with that. So like why would you be even hesitant to want to be a part of that? And I felt like it was a little bit of a control thing and I didn't love that either.
Yeah.
So it was for the best between that and hair. I've only had bad experiences with those kinds of vendors and everything else has been smooth sailing since. So it's not terrible, but those have been my big wedding flops that
And
I
it's
would say.
almost here, right?
It is January. Yep, we're almost there. So we're in that last stretch. Gabby's taking over. My parents, my mom, they live in Colorado, and my mom gets in tonight actually. And they're staying all the way through the end of January. They got a house down here, and they're just gonna be here to help.
Nice.
My dad's been here for a month, and he'll tell you he came down to help with whatever I need. But that man has hit the golf course more than he's
Of
seen me.
course he has.
Of course he has, but no, he's down here. They're born and raised here, so it's not unfamiliar territory. He's got his friends down here, so
Okay.
it's not too overwhelming and like impeding in my daily activities, but I'm excited to like have them close by. So it'll be good. I don't have to move for the holidays. I think that's I don't envy anybody that's like a January, February bride that's also trying to travel for the holidays. Could not be me. I refuse. I told them, I was like, I'm not coming home for Christmas. I love you guys, but this will be your first Christmas without me. I'm not doing it. So they were like, we'll come down. I was just, there's no way. So it'll be nice to have stability and everything like that. But I'm excited.
It's nice that you don't have to sacrifice like family holiday because you're turning right around and getting married. So
I,
that works
yeah,
really well.
very fortunate for that. And I think that it's great that they're able to come and stay down and help too. I know a lot of people don't get that privilege, and that's another reason why planners are so important because they're able to help when those parents aren't around. I feel like more and more we're seeing people move away from home. And if you're not at home and you're getting married in a state that you don't have family, you're planning that wedding by yourself. So a planner becomes your family, very imperative part of it. So I'm just the biggest supporter and like rooter for planners. I love a wedding planner. Couldn't be me, but I love them.
I love that. I love that. There, we need more people gassing up the importance of the planner. I gas up the importance of all vendors are important if the discipline is important to the couple. It used to be planners were kind of like, oh, you don't need one. But I think there's just too much going on in the industry and in the world that like you can't think that you can execute this day on your own. Like you need a professional next to you.
Well, and even the people now, we're seeing the rise of venues that are now like all encompassing. They're still far and few in between, but we're seeing more of it. And as we see the grow of the venue that has everything from catering to this, to that, to this, to that, that you don't have to go outside and book, at least they need to have planners on property or preferred planners. I will say my very good friend is planning on getting married at the Tampa Aquarium next year. And of course, she comes to me and she's like, the aquarium is pretty strict on they have a vendor list. And it's like, you get to pick from these. This is who we work with. And they do everything. So you're not bringing anybody outside. So it technically is a very easy job for her, but they do have a preferred like day of planner list that she has to pick from. So she brought me the list and I was like, okay, they're a Marry Me Tampa Bay vendor. I like that one. I like that one. Helped her pick. But in hindsight, I look at her and I'm like, yeah, your planning job is going to be a lot easier than mine because they require all of that for you. And I love seeing that for the bride that's the busy bride that can't handle it. But there's still, all venues aren't there yet. And I don't think they ever will be. So you're always going to have a need for like a full-time planner that's outside of the venue space. I also think vendors getting on those preferred list is such an important priority for planners because as we do see that shift, having that, solid reliability of knowing you're on that list, I think is fantastic too.
I agree.
Okay, well, we'll close up here because we're about to go. Well, we have gone over our hour, but I do want to ask like one final question. If you have any kind of tips for upcoming 2024 couples, tips for vendors, or tips for other planners, what would be kind of your overarching what you want to share with everybody?
I think we're moving quicker. You, time is more important now than it ever has been, and I do not agree that the 48 to 72 hour response time is a standard that should continue to be practiced. I think it needs to be 24 to 48. I wish everybody was like me and did 12 hours, but you can't let a signed client go longer than a day if you're in a discipline where you're providing continuing ongoing service. So if you reach out to your photographer and your wedding's not for another year and a half, okay, give them a little more grace. But like planners should really, because like you said earlier, when you're in a city by yourself and you don't have family support, if we're not there next to you, it's hard to justify that we're the comparable support to family. And
Yep.
then for couples, I would say um, kick the tires more. Really do research. Really look into tags and see what other couples are saying about vendor before engaging them to book. Like, is this a vendor that you vibe with? And if, well, they could be, I would keep looking, because there are enough of us that you're going to find somebody who, like, instantly it's a match. You feel it. The vibes are there. And I wouldn't shortchange that as something that's intangible but really important.
Well, and I think you've like alluded to it so much in how you go above and beyond for your couples. I can vouch for the fact that yes, I had that shitty photographer experience, but when I had my photographer Ashley come around, Ashley does more than she needs to do, more than she's contracted to do. Ashley is the queen of she's constantly sending me pictures of ideas that she finds on Pinterest or is like, "Ooh, you should do this. This would be cute." Like she's not a planner, she's not a bridesmaid, and yet she's filling like pieces in that only A, make her job prettier and more aesthetic, but B, are like helpful to me. And I think that that level of a vendor of going above and beyond, that's the vendor I think that people need to look for because they're out there. They're just a little bit harder to find sometimes. That's all.
Well, I cannot wait to see your wedding.
Oh, I can't wait to. I'm so excited. But I appreciate you, Shaun, so much for coming on and chatting with us. I know this probably will not be the last time we chat, but everybody, I will make sure to link all of his socials down there below in the little caption section so you guys can give him a follow. You post fantastic videos on TikTok about just wedding information we need to know. So I definitely recommend giving him a follow if you're upcoming 2024 couple or, you know, in the future, if you see that being your journey. So thank you so much, Shaun. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Gabby. Thanks for having me. This was